So what we're going to do is take over again over my take on the gap. Okay. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay. My understanding, because the ands that follow after that all point to a different creative act. Okay. So this and cannot be a continuation of Genesis 1. The reason why it can't be is because all the other ones point to a specific act. Does that make sense? So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So, in my studies throughout the years, I've come across many different views of creation. I can tell you that though I've not vacillated from my view, I've matured in my view and my understanding of it. See, the thing about it is, as you read the Bible and you let the Bible speak to you, you'll start seeing things. The problem is that most people read the Bible and then they go to a book to tell them what the Bible says. You know? Now, there's nothing wrong with commentaries. I like commentaries. I read commentaries. Gabeline is one of my favorite people to read. You know, but you can't take his view. You can glean off what's right, but you got to spit out the rest. So what you do, you have to grow in your understanding of it. And you grow in your understanding of it is by reading the Bible. I mean, how many books do you know that you have to read a commentary on the book that you read? Besides the Bible. Oh, I know it, but I'm just saying, they'll say, well, when you go to somewhere, you know, like you were pretty grounded in your understanding. So I had no problem giving you George Williams' commentary. Okay. And they were pretty good. So, but because it's good, it just gives you some insights. But that's all they're there for, is give you some insights. You don't take it. That's what's wrong with covenant theology right now, is because covenant theology says this guy had it all right. There's no more truth to be gained, and we're going to follow him. Well, you're not following God then. Who are you following? That man. Yeah, party spirit. Yeah. And so that's what happens. So see, I don't mind if y'all disagree with me on something. You can disagree with me. So if you don't believe what I understand in the gaps, doesn't mean you're going to go to hell. This means you haven't come far along where I have. You see what I'm saying? So it's something that you can discuss and talk about without having a church split. You see, our view is not the point here. In any other part of Scripture, God does not need our approval or standards. What is even worse is if our views and standards are not even our own, but rather what we've gleaned from others' writings. We have to be careful of this, for someday we are going to have to stand before God, our Maker, and give an account. And He's not going to ask you what G. Campbell Morgan or Ironside or Gabeline or McGee thought about the Scriptures. He's going to ask you what you did with the Scriptures. That's the reason it says, study to show thyself approved unto God, not study what other men showed to be approved unto God. We must always be Bereans, searching out the treasures in the book Truth. Acts 17:11 says they were more noble than those of Thessalonica, in that when they received the word with all readiness of mind, then they searched the Scriptures daily whether those things were so. So they received the preaching with all readiness of mind. They had open ears. They didn't sit there with closed ears and say, oh, well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. They received it saying, well, that may be true. Now let me check. Okay. We must make a stand, and that stand should be an informed one. I do not mean to say that we must dabble with many different dogmas on the Scriptures and then decide which one we'll take for our doctrine. I say in the strongest terms, no, don't do that. Because what you're going to do is you mess yourself up. If you believe something, all right, you have the facts, don't mess with the false. Okay? Now, once you have the facts and you're grounded in the truth, if you want to understand how somebody believes, that's fine. But if you're trying to find your way, don't do that. Right. See, and there's a book, and it's also a movie called The Razor's Edge. Have you ever heard of it? Okay, on the razor's edge, the guy has his life was saved during World War One. Dramatically changes it because he feels like he should make up for that man's life. Well, in the process of that, he dabbles in all different things. Starts reading books, starts doing this, starts doing religions, and ends up in India. Chasing a guru and things like that. Yeah, that's not following wisdom. That's following the world. There's great things you can learn in books. I'm an advocate of books, but your truth should come from one book, and that's your Bible, your King James Bible. There's nothing wrong with reading about the life of Buddha if you understand that Buddha is just a man. There's nothing wrong with reading how and trying to figure out where they got. See, they say in this book, and they're wrong, that the nearest writing to this book was within 100 years of Jesus' death during the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Paul's writings. Commentary, Plato. They say, yeah, within 100 years it was written. Now, the Bible itself says that Peter and them were reading Paul's writings. By the time, the only thing they didn't have was 2 Timothy. And they've read all the writings. So that's a lie. But they're scholars, so they got to be right? Well, my doctor says you're not supposed to eat butter. Everybody else says you're supposed to eat butter now. You're not supposed to have meat. You're supposed to eat vegetables. What does the science say now? You're supposed to eat meat. I remember when I was a kid, you couldn't eat eggs because eggs was giving you heart attacks. Now they say eggs are one of the most healthy things to eat to prevent you from heart attacks. That's what scholars do. They can't make up their mind. The Bible doesn't change. The only Bible that's changed is when somebody changes it. And you have to change it a certain amount to get it published. Right. It's a profitable thing. So when we take a stand, we must take a stand on the Word of God, not on what I say, not what anybody else says. You need to search it out for yourself, because if you don't search it out for yourself and you just say repeat what I say, I'll deny it, even if I said it. Okay? Because you're not supposed to be standing on what Travis says. Travis is a near-do-well idiot most of the time, so don't trust me. Trust the Word. It'd be like the mother who had a little child in preschool. After about 3 weeks, the child told her mother that she wanted a spirit geist. You know what a geist is, right? A geist is a ghost. Okay. And the mother blew this off, thinking the child was watching too much TV. But after another couple of weeks, the child came to her and said, I have a spirit geist. Well, the mother freaked out. She started alarmed. She started calling the school, causing all trouble. And after about the 4th exorcism, she figured out that the child was really asking for asparagus. Yeah. So that's what you don't want to be an alarmist. You don't want to be somebody that drops off the edge. You want to use your common sense and logic. I mean, it's just like we're reading. Okay, so we're reading in Daniel now. Well, when you read the book, then people are just like you. You need to ask questions like, well, why wasn't Daniel there? Where would he be? And start studying out and see what things were going on. Well, Gideon, why was he down there in the valley? Well, he was scared. Haven't you ever been scared? Somebody says, I need you to go make this presentation the day before, and you're like, I don't even know the subject. Oh, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. So you've got to be prepared. You got to listen and not jump off and make sure what somebody's saying before you jump down their throat. It's a lot of people, they'll say stuff about salvation, and what they mean and what they say is two different things. I've been born again. Well, they don't understand what they're talking about. They have a new life in Christ, but they don't understand because of the teaching that they come out. It's not born again. Only Israel can be born again. So you got to give grace when you're doing these things. But we must go to the source, the Holy Spirit. It teaches us then we can see through other men's writings and be able to eat the meat and spit out the bones. See, so there's nothing wrong with going to read anything. I mean, if you want to read Karl Marx, read Karl Marx. But, huh? Yeah, but what I'm saying is, but how can you understand somebody's mind without reading the book? Even if they're wrong. You have to find out how they got wrong. How can you help somebody if you can't see how they missed the track? As long as you're grounded, this is your authority. Okay? So this is your authority. Yeah, I'm saying that, but I'm saying you have the freedom to read whatever. I'm not saying you can't read whatever you want, look whatever you want, watch whatever you want, do whatever you want. God never says you can't do that. But keep your authority. Now, you shouldn't fill your mind with disgusting stuff. Although you can't watch TV pretty much anymore without filling your mind with disgusting stuff. So, but we must go to stores. We must stay with the thing that it is. So there's going to be, like these, we're talking about Daniel, talking about how Rome and stuff like that. That's the view of the church. If it's a dispensational church, they'll say Rome is the thing of iron. That's okay. They can be wrong if they want to. You see? We just have to follow what God says and follow what the Word says. And if why argue about that? Is that going to affect their salvation? It's not even part of our time. We're not going to be here when it happens, so what does it care? Yeah. But see, that's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're right. Let God be true and every man a liar. 2 Timothy 2:14. These things put them in remembrance, charging them before the Lord that they strive not about words to no profit, but to the subverting of the hearers. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly divide the word of truth. So I love debating. I used to love to get on Facebook and debate, because I can't write very well. I can't do anything, but I know the Bible pretty good. And so I'd let people just hook themselves into a trap, and then I'd set it, Do what? Yeah, I just let them hook themselves in. Because anytime you have somebody that thinks, I know everything, they're so easy. Because their arrogance don't let them see the trap. But that's not what we're supposed to do. You're not supposed to strive not about words to no profit. Look, if you want to believe in Calvinism, go ahead. If you want to believe that Satan's right, go ahead. That doesn't affect me. I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. You have the right to believe what you want to believe and be a fool if you want to be a fool. My job is not to save the world. My job is to present the gospel. What you do with it is your business. But shun profane and vain babblings, for they increase unto more ungodliness. So if you sit there and what happens when you start debating somebody, and no matter what you show them, they just don't see the truth? Yeah, you get aggravated. You get mad. It's like talking to an atheist. You ever talk to an atheist? An atheist don't have the truth. They just don't believe God. So they'll just throw stupid stuff out there and say stupid things because they don't have anything to stand on, because everything that they have changes every 10 years. It's silliness. But if you're sitting there and argue with it, it doesn't do no good. All you do is walk away frustrated, and they haven't changed anything. We are not called to be right. Only God can be right. If we ever set ourselves to be the scholar, not the student, we will always fall into error. Let's take E.W. Bullinger, for example. In my opinion, there was not have been a brighter, more intelligent, minor truth since the Apostle Paul. His only failure that I can see is that at some point it became more important that he was right, and through his company he kept, Sir Robert Anderson, that he left what it was clearly taught in Scriptures and can be seen by anyone who is honestly looking, which is the mid-exposition, to a corruption of the truth, repudiating what he had written before and began to propagate a corruption of the truth, an Acts 28 position. taking from the hands of those who followed him the precious books of Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and saying that belonged to the Greeks of that time, and casting them into a non-biblical dispensation called the Acts Dispensation, made for certain believers. But he got so wanting to be right. See, that's what happens, though, is because when you get right, what happens when you start thinking you're right about it? You get puffed up, you get with pride, and when you get pride, Satan's got you. That's it. Was this intention? I do not believe so. But it was the outcome, and it always is. What should be harmony becomes discord. So instead of lauding this man with praise for his work in the recovery of truth, we use his life as a cautionary tale. Discord is now the realm of Satan. He was created to lead the very worship of God. Instead, has become the clinging symbol of history. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. When we deal with Genesis 1:1, the very first thing that is to note is that God had two spheres that he was interested in. There are no heavens yet, only heaven. Question is, how can we deduce from what is in the scriptures what is the creation and what it was not? What was in this creation, what was not? Now, how do you deduce that? How do you figure that out? You read. The Bible's set up as progressive revelation. You don't get it all at one time. It's not a textbook. It slowly progresses. It's like it mentions the two magicians that Pharaoh withstood, but it doesn't give their names till way longer in the Bible that you find out they're Janus and Jambres. You see, it doesn't give it all to you at one time. You've got to read the whole thing to get the point. Now, before we go on, I want to tell you, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I can barely read English. I can't hardly write it. So I'm not going to use any Hebrew words or stand up here looking like a fool trying to be wise. Okay? I'm going to use my own personal copy of the King James Bible, the Scofield Study Bible. I'm going to rely on Scofield for his interpretation of the Hebrew words because he relied on some of the greatest Hebrew scholars there were. Though there are many who do not agree with everything that Scofield says, including me, there is no one that I have or ever heard of that condemns his transitory notes on either Hebrew or Greek. You want to know why I use Scofield? That's why. As he says himself, his Bible is a synthesis of some 50 years of labor by many besides himself. There are only three creative acts in the first chapter of Genesis: the heaven and the earth versus animals, life, and human life. In other words, used means to bring forth, to make appear. So that creative act is something out of nothing. Now, God made the body out of clay, but what made life in us was directly from him. Okay, see the difference? When he talks about the animals, he made them and brought them to life. But what was already here? He said he made the trees and stuff, he made them appear. So that means the seeds and stuff was already there. We can gather from this information that sometime in the dayless past, God created heaven and earth. On this earth, there were plant life, but no animals, no humans. So when you hear about, like in Dake, where he talks about the pre-Adamic race of man, didn't happen. We, by doing a little research, can find that heaven was created first, along with the stars, the sun, the moon. God at this time created beings called sons of God. These beings were present and beheld the creation of the earth. And alongside those were the morning stars. Job 38:1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by the words without knowledge? Gird up thy loins like a man, for I will demand thee. Answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare thou if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measure thereof, if thou knowest? Who hath stretched the line upon it, whereupon the foundation there is fashioned? Who laid the cornerstones? When the morning stars, cherubim, seraphim, sang together, and the sons of God, angelic realm, shouted for joy. So they had to be created first, so they couldn't be singing and shouting for joy. Upon the earth, God designated a geographical area as Eden. This Eden has a very different description from the Eden of Adam and Eve. Though they are in the same geographical area. To see this, we need to look at the career of the one who brought the world that then was to its end. It's a lot easier writing this stuff than it is reading it, I'm telling you. Ezekiel 28:12. The Son of Man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou stillest at the sum, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. Ezekiel 28:13. Thou hast seen Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. The sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, the gold, the workmanship of thy tabrets, the pipes was prepared in thee in the day which thou wast created. So this can't be a mere mortal man. Why? He's made of jewels and he's seen the garden of God, Eden. Thou art the anointed cherubim that covereth. I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou wast walked up down in the midst of the stones of fire. So if he was in Eden and Eden was covered with the stones of fire, could you live there? There is a lot here, but the things I want you to see is that Satan was in Eden, and Eden contained a mountain of God and a pathway of flaming stones. The condition is in this Eden are not favorable to human life. Therefore it is not the same Eden as Adam had. Let me give you a little exposition of the verse. 1:15-16 of Psalms. The heavens, even the heavens, are the Lord's, but the earth he hath given it to the children of man. What does that tell you? The heaven, period. The heavens, plural, are the Lord's. What does that leave out? Life on other planets. Okay? No aliens. No live long and prosper. It's fun to watch on sci-fi, but that's all it is. There are no little green man, purple man, yellow man. None of that's out there. The only thing out there is the Lord Jesus Christ, his angels, his cherubim, his seraphim, and the fallen angels. And you don't see the cherubim and seraphim. You only see the works of the fallen angels. You don't even see the works of the real angels now, the ones that followed him. Because we live in a time that we walk by faith, not by sight. The heaven, aka creation, even the heavens, aka recreation, are the Lord's, but the earth he hath given to men, aka the earth was God's, but was given to man after the recreation. What I'm trying to say is that something happened to the original creation, and that was the fall of the rebellion of Lucifer, who is known as the devil or Satan. Ezekiel 28:15. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day thou wast created until iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence. Thou hast sinned, therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Hadn't happened yet, has it? It's a promise. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries. by the multitude of thy iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. So he's a merchandise. He's a salesman. He's selling a merchandise. He's trafficking in it and saying, hey, you know what? That God over there, he made you this, but I think you got so much more potential. If you follow me, I'll give you a better position. And what they do? Okay. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thy iniquity, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore I will bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee the ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them beholding. Now, people will say, you see there, God destroys Satan. He says he's going to bring you the ashes upon the earth, but it doesn't say that he's not going to reconstitute him. You see that? He's a spiritual being. You can't kill him. Ezekiel 28:19, and all they that know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee. Thou shalt be a terror, and neither there shalt thou be any more. So we're looking all the way into the future at the end of the kingdom when God finally takes care of Satan. Isaiah 14, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How did he get to heaven? What did he say he's going to do? He says, I am going to do something, right? So here we go. How art thou fallen from heaven? I was off thy throne above the stars. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. I'll in the sides of the north. He didn't start out in heaven. It just says that I was on my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Where was he when he started it? If he wasn't in the heavens, he had to go to heaven and then fall from heaven. And you got to remember, this is something that people are going to be proclaiming after his fall. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. So if he's ascended above the heights of clouds, that means he was what? Below them. I will be like the Most High. With the fall of Satan, God moved out of his creation to the north above it, the flood and flooded the creation. Dead things, Job 26:5, dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. He doesn't say that they're like corpses like in the dead marshes. They're dead because they're separated from God. Hell is naked before him, and destruction hath no covering. He stretches out the north over the empty places, and hangs the earth upon nothing. This brings us to Genesis 1:2. So what happened is that Satan fell. Satan deceived himself. Satan tried to reach the judgment place of God in the sides of the north. Tried to set himself above, tried to set him a throne upon that mountain. And God destroyed the earth and the universe. Now, how long that happened, how long that took place, was it 2 days? Was it 1,000,000,000 years? No one knows. So if somebody says, well, I think the earth is 120 million years old, okay. And somebody says, well, I think the earth's only 6,000 years, okay. Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So the gap is not something that's there as a theory. The gap is fact. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Look, go to Genesis 1. Just clarify what I was talking about. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and void. Okay. 3, and God said, let there be light. 4, and God saw the light. That are all distinct different actions. It's not a conjunctive and, it's a separate and. It distinguishes the difference. You see that? So, if he does it all the way through, which he does, why would 2 be any different? It wouldn't. So, what we have in the beginning of the Bible, now people like Ken Ham and them, they want to prove so right that they're right and the earth is a young earth. Well, it is a young earth. This earth, the recreation is young. It's about 6,000 some odd years old. But the matter that was here was already here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And there was what? Darkness and water. So there was earth, water, and darkness. Before he said, let there be light. When is the first day? Let's go back to there. When is the first day? So I'm not saying any lies. 4. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and morning were the first day. So there was a creation. There was darkness, there was earth, there was water before there was a day. You see the problem? If it's a 6-day creation, how can there be that? There can't. There's a 6-day recreation, not 6 days with that important. Any questions on that? I mean, does that make sense? Who created the darkness? God. I created the darkness. Why did he create the darkness? He says that he changed angels in chains of what? Can't move without light. Have you ever been in a room? Matter of fact, this church is one. Steve is real bad about turning that light off before we're out of here and showing that you can't see. You can see that little bitty light. That's like, follow the light, because there's a little bitty light there coming through the thing. That's it. So, I mean, he changed them in darkness because they can't function without the light. They are made as creatures of light because God is light and there is no darkness in him. No turning, no shadow. So they were created in the image of God. So the image of God is light and light is life, and that's how they function. If you take the light away, they can't function. So God says, let there be light. What did the angels that were fallen do? They gathered around that light. They were stuck in this creation. So don't let people sit there like the creation. Go see the Noah's Ark, but take that stuff with a grain of salt. What they're wanting to do is prove the Bible by science. That is not faith. Okay, this is my theory of evolution. Because they say, well, if you don't believe the first of the Bible, then you can't believe the last of the Bible. Well, the problem is you're not believing the first of the Bible because the first day doesn't happen until the 5th chapter, and there's already a creation done. Yeah, because they say, well, you don't believe this part, and they say what they say is they put up a straw man. They say, well, the only reason that people believe this is because evolution said this, and the church changed its mind to equate for the time that science had. That's okay. Some of them did, but not everybody. Okay? Not everybody did. There were people that understood this before that. Just like there was people that understood that Christ was coming back and Israel was going to have a kingdom back when the church first started. It's not something that has changed. It's just something that's not in vogue. Just take it as it says. If it says it didn't create it until chapter 5, this was the first day, all that stuff before was something else. And God said he didn't create the heaven and the earth to be void, then it had to be something that was there. You have to have time for Satan's fall. Satan didn't fall in Genesis chapter 3. Satan had already failed. And the thing about it is that we don't know how long it went trucked along in the first creation before Satan fell. Yeah, it says the earth was there. What is this? And it gives a designation for earth. What is earth? Dry land. Okay, so there already was dry land that was immersed and emulsified in the water. So if he says without form and void, it means that there was actually just suspended in the water. Now that comes to the question: how big was Earth back then? Was the Earth the only planet? You see, you don't know.
Where's the dinosaurs go?
Where's the dinosaurs? What does Job say? 39, I think. See, we were talking about this the other day. We were talking about Behemoth and Leviathan. Okay, here it is. Job 40, 15. Behold now behemoth, which I made thee. He eateth grass as an ox. Who ate grass like an ox? Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. Who is Nebuchadnezzar? Type of the Antichrist. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and his force is in his navel, his belly. The composite beast. Who moved his tail like a cedar, the sinew of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong as pieces of brass. His bones are like iron. The composite beast, Daniel 7, he is the chief of his ways. God has made him, he can make his sword approach unto him. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of field play, lieth under the shady trees, in the cover of the reed of bends. The shady trees cover him with their shadows, and the willows of the brook compass him. Now, this is an animal, but this animal is a type, is a picture of the Antichrist. But Job knew who this animal was. When they said behemoth, he knew what it was. Well, the only thing that could be is a dinosaur. Right? Then he goes on, he talks about Leviathan. And he says talks about his nesting like fire, his scales you can't put a sword through, and all these things. And then at the end of it says, behold, he beholdeth all high things. He is the king of all the children of pride. Well, who's that? That's Satan. But Job wasn't looking at Satan. What was he looking at? He was looking at animals. It talks about a place the bulls, the deep boil. I was talking about over the coast of Japan, they had something that was going under the water with a light falling from it, and the water boiled. You've seen it too. And so the thing about it is, there's something still in that ocean that Job had seen, and he knew exactly what it was. And they called Leviathan, and he said, that's a type of Satan. So there were dinosaurs there. The problem is that what we see as dinosaurs now are what dinosaurs look like. And they also describe the satyrs. Well, the satyrs are not Pan, the satyrs are demons. Every foul bird, demons. So you have these things and you understand what God's doing. It says, you see how this is? Well, this is just like that in the spiritual world. So when you see that, people say, well, dinosaurs were here when Job was here. God created the creation, he created dinosaurs. And like I said, I told you, I believe in fairies and sprites and stuff like that, but I do not think that they're Tinkerbell. I think that they were demonic spirits. Remember the Lord of the Flies? How could you be a Lord of the Flies? He says and the guy said that he had a legion. Legion's what, 1,000? Okay, 1,000. So how could you get 1,000 spirits in one body? Unless they were small. And he says he's the Lord of the Flies. Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. So the spirit that wasn't God's spirit, it was the spirit that was created in that thing. It's small. Like a fly.
5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 for a legion. So how small would they have to be? You see? That's why he's called Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. And what do they say the sprites look like? Small, glowing lights to the world. Now, were they actually dealing with these things? Yes, they were. They were dealing with them because their religion and stuff was worshiping those things. And when you give yourself over to those things, you will see things.
Well, what about the bones that they found in dinosaurs?
They're real. Yeah, they're real, but they wasn't pre-flood. They were after the creation, after the recreation. That's the reason that
Before God made heaven, that light and all that.
Have you ever heard of St. George's Day? St. George's Day? George and the Dragon? Yeah, George and the Dragon. Read your histories. You'll find that they were fighting dragons even back in the medieval times. You see this knights going out to fight the dragon. Now, understand, a lizard will grow as long as it lives. So will a snake. So will an alligator. So as long as it lives, if you got a lizard that lives 900 years, That's going to be a pretty big lizard. You see? And we've lost so many species over the years. Just in our lifetimes, we've lost so many of them. Who's to say how many species of animals that we're seeing now are in bone form that was alive when Job was here? Yeah. The Bible, the people make things confusing. The Bible doesn't. Okay. Now, when he said, like I said, Behemoth is Antichrist, Leviathan is Satan. But the creatures that Job is seeing is not the Antichrist nor Satan. Just like the king of Tyre and the prince of Tyre. You see, the king of Tyre was the power behind the throne, Satan, and the prince of Tyre was that king that was upon the earth. But they still represent types. The prince was the king, so he was the type. So he's the type of the Antichrist. The king behind him is the type of Satan who's controlling the Antichrist.
We say that again. Behemoth is what?
Behemoth was I can't remember what the dinosaur is. The biggest dinosaur they had. That's what it is. The big meat eater. But he's the type of the Antichrist. He's the composite beast.
In the commentary.
Yeah. Now read the elephant. Does the elephant have a tail like a cedar beam? No, it's got a tail like a little bitty old thing, like a long pigtail. Yeah. But it's got the long neck. It feeds from the mountain, so it has to have a tall neck. There's a dinosaur out there I think it was like 100 foot tall and 300 foot long. That's it. He's seen it. Problem is we want to sit there and say we're right. Well, no, it's only 6,000 years old. Well, people say, no, them fossils are back from the old age. If the world was decimated and without void and form, and it was saturated through the universe, there wouldn't be no bones left. Yeah, there wouldn't be no bones left. So the thing about it is what happens is we've got these stupid children's stories in Sunday school that corrupts their mind. Yeah, it's like the little boat. You always every Sunday school you ever go and you see Noah's boat, and they got the giraffe's got his head sticking out and all of them. That doesn't look like anything like what God describes at all. But that's what people picture. Sacrifice, the first sacrifice. Yeah. And now but see, there's a clean animal. Well, Noah didn't know anything about clean animals. He's got further revelation. So when he sees them, he calls them clean Ramesses. It's like a virus. In the Bible, it's called Ramesses. At the time of Joseph, it was a virus was the city. Why? Because Avaris ceased to exist. And so some scribe somewhere down the line said, well, I know where that is, but it's now Ramesses, so I'm going to write Ramesses is so everybody knows what it is. It's common sense, but people don't take it common sense. They try to make it something different. Oh, I've got something from God. Yeah, it's called the Bible. Just read it. You don't have no other interpretations. But when you take the Bible and set all those things aside, that's the hard part. So I was blessed because I'd been to churches, but I never grew up in church. I grew up with the Bible. So when I look at these things, I look at it in a different light than people that grew up in a denomination, because the denomination keeps creeping up and trying to tell you what that means. You go to a Baptist church and everybody that sees baptism in the Bible thinks, oh, it's water. It's water. But tell me, did Moses and the Israel people get wet when they crossed? It was dry, wasn't it? But it was called a baptism. They were baptized under Moses. Baptism is not whether you're dipped or not dipped. Baptism is an association. It's becoming part of. So when they went across, they didn't have to go across, but they did. They trusted Moses. And what did God say that Moses would be? Moses would be a God unto them, and Aaron like a prophet. So they put their faith in Moses and crossed. They didn't put their faith in God. You ever thought about that?
Well, was Job before the flood or after the flood? I mean, in the story about Job.
Okay. In the Bible, you'll find out that there's lots of gaps, but there's two gaps that are flood. All right, so you have the creation. C-E-C-R-E-A-T-I-O-N. That's the creation. In that creation, God makes a heaven and an earth. He makes the sons of God. He makes the morning stars. Okay. Then he destroys it because of Satan's fall. Then he makes a recreation. He didn't get rid of those angels. He just imprisoned them in the destruction. Without form and void. Okay? So he opens it back up. Well, who's there when he opens it back up? The fallen angels. Okay? And then he makes man. And he gives man dominion of what was his, the earth, that he abdicated and left because he can't be around sin. Okay? So we truck along. These guys that are free, they come in, they see the daughters of men, they mate with the daughters of man, they corrupt the whole genome until there's only Noah and his 3 sons that continue on the human race. The rest of them are corrupted. That's the reason he preached 120 years and no one came because they couldn't. So he floods the earth again. And man still inherits it, but it's Noah and his sons. Now the next time he destroys it, what's he going to use? Fire. That's the reason God put a rainbow, and he said, what? No more will I destroy the earth with water. So you read there's 2 floods in the Genesis story. So when he recreates it here, he makes animal life. Well, what's an animal? What constitutes an animal? Is a lizard an animal? Yeah. Is a fish an animal? Is a fowl an animal? Now you want a question that I wonder about. It says that God made all the fishes, animals of the sea, the whales, great whales, and the fowls the day he makes them out of water. And then it turns around and says that he makes them out of the dirt. Go figure that one. No, let's read it here. Yeah, I ain't got any place to go, do you? Where's Job? Job wasn't around in this one. And Job's after this one. Okay? After this flood, the descendants go out and they spread upon the earth, and Job's down there below Israel in a land called Havilah. But he's before Abraham. He's after Noah, before Abraham. Well, he's not. Because he's not in the genealogy. He has one point and one picture in there. But he's a son of Eber. Remember, Eber had 2 sons? And then Peleg and the other one. He's one of those sons. But he's not a son that follows the line of prod. He's the other son, but he still follows God. See? So Job's there. So that tells you that when God created dinosaurs, he made them here. They survived the flood, and they were still around even in the time of Job. No, remember he had an ark, and he took 2 of every kind. Why not? They're animals. Look. Okay. Huh? How would you get inside of it? It says he took one of every kind. Okay. Okay, so there's dog is a species. The kind is dog. So he could have took 2 dogs and made all the other dogs over again. Right? Right. And just because it says dinosaurs, he's not going to get a 300-foot dinosaur. What would you do if you had to put him on a boat? You get the baby. You get the baby. The eggs. Have you ever seen dinosaurs' eggs? They're not much bigger than an ostrich egg. So if you got a baby dinosaur, a year and a half in the boat, it wouldn't have took up hardly any space at all.
So that's what I'm getting to is when they're finding the bones and stuff of dinosaurs, I thought if it was a big flood, they would be destroyed. But if they are still there after the flood, then they could get their bones, basically.
Right. Well, the dinosaurs, okay, so you have most of the animals, most of man, most of creation was destroyed in the flood, okay? Except for, there was, how many left of, there was Noah, his 3 sons, and the 4 wives. Then all the creation that was left was the kinds that were left in the boat. So from that, the whole world was repopulated again. That's the reason you can go down in South America and they found stones of people fighting battles on dinosaurs, carved with the stones.
A couple years ago, they said that they proved that the flood happened because they found a mammoth that had grass in its belly, and wherever he was, there wouldn't have been grass before the flood. But where was that?
It was in Siberia. It literally had buttercups in its mouth. Okay, so what happens is you have an Earth that's all one geographical place. It's not divided like it is. That's why it says, and the Earth was divided in peg legs time. The Earth was spreading apart. It was all one geographical, what they call Pangea. Okay. Okay, so the Earth was all one thing, all one temperature. It had no rain. The mist came up and stuff like that. So the floods, the Earth broke up. Okay, and breaks up right down the middle of it. They call it what do they call it? The line of fire or something like that. Ring of fire. Broke up and the waters of the deep came up. Okay, so the waters of the deep are coming up. What's the water going to do? See, I was on a rig one time. Yeah, it's going to come back down. So, and it rained for 40 days. Why was it raining for 40 days? Because the waters of the deep were going up. Does that make sense? I was on a rig one time, actually it's up here somewhere, and we hit an old coal mine that had caved in and it had water under pressure under it, and that water shot up 300 foot in the air, but it didn't stay there. It came all back down on us, you see? And so that water's broken up from the deep and it starts raining because the water's burst up in the atmosphere and it's raining down all over the earth and it's flooded. But the animals that are in the ark are saved. And so when they get off, they repopulate. Then over time, for people hunting, it's like we had the American bison, or at one time there was a bigger bison that was 6 foot tall at the shoulders. Well, they found, they were like, well, how did they go extinct? Well, they found these places on the plains where people would herd them up and run them off cliffs. And then they'd kill whole herds at a time. Well, how did they get extinct? Just like that. Because we ate them. Yeah. So, but yeah, them dinosaurs, that's the reason when they cut into dinosaurs, they're still finding soft tissue in the bones because they're not that old. They're not 6,000 or 10 million years old. They're probably 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Does that make sense? Yeah. But see, a lot of stuff, what they tell you is they tell you that so you won't see the truth. They want you to believe the science instead of believe what they are. Who? Okay. Now, the caveman come in. It's interesting that you say that. Nimrod came into power. What was Nimrod? What was his title? A mighty hunter before God. Well, what was he hunting? Men. He was the first slaver. So what would you do if somebody was trying to enslave you? You would spread out into another part of the country to leave. So if you spread out into Europe at that time, which was still under the Ice Age conditions, would reading really matter to you? Would astronomy really matter to you? You couldn't farm. What would you do? You'd find a cave and you'd go into survival mode. There's your cavemen. They say, well, they have different brow ridges. Do you know that the longer a person lives, the thicker their brow ridges get? So when they find these guys that they're calling Cro-Magnon men, they're just really old humans. You know? You see, that's all that stuff is such a lie to get you not to believe God. Yeah. Yeah. And guess what? Guess what color Nimrod was? He was black. Yeah, the first slave owner was a black man, the one that created it. That's why you reap what you sow. It all comes around. Well, that was a good one, even the second time.